Thanks for joining us at Tour J, Climate Smart Ag. I'm going to be speaking to you on how rainfall is changing and affecting water management in Tennessee. My name is Brian Leib. I'm a professor and extension irrigation specialist in Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science at the University of Tennessee. I'd also like to recognize Sean Moran, who is an undergraduate intern in our department who helped me process and graph this data. Some goals I have for this presentation is to show you how rainfall and temperature is changing over the last 40 years from NOAA weather stations, to show you how rainfall and crop water use is changing over the last 16 years from University of Tennessee weather stations, and then to examine the effect of these weather patterns on water management in Tennessee. Here's that 40 years of NOAA data, and I could have went back further. They have more data, but I thought that was long enough. And you see here on the left is the average yearly rainfall, which averages 52 inches, but can go up to 65 and down as low as 37. And I guess what I'd like to do is just divide this in half for now, which is around 2020, and look at the trends. So what I think you'll see, it's a little bit covered up, but if you remove this 2007, the driest year, you'll see a lot of high peaks on this side of 2020. And the peaks below average aren't near as low. And so you'll see more of these low peaks down on this side. So I think that data is showing us it's gotten wetter in the past 20 years versus the previous 20 years. When we look at temperature and do the same split, I think this one's really easy to see. Here you see it kind of jumping back and forth across the average line, but here mostly we see most of the temperatures have been above the average for that time period. So increase in temperature. That could point to increase in crop water use, but it's not the whole story. More rainfall means more cloud cover, which could reduce soil radiation and be a reducing factor to crop water use. Another way to present that data is to look at the summer data fall when we are doing more irrigation and we maybe think more about water management. If we split those 20 years again, 81 to 2000, and then 2001 to 2020, and just the summer months of July through September. Here, if you go in West Tennessee at the border, it's like 9 inches versus in the middle of this bar, we're at 11.5. So as you go across, we're pretty much 2.5 inches higher in the last 20 years than the previous 20 years. So I think that shows us that we've had noticeably more rainfall in the last 20 years. What I've just showed you came from the NOAA stations, that these blue dots, which we have a lot of data over a long time period, but it really couldn't show us everything we wanted because I wanted to show crop water use, which we can't really do very well from just temperature data. So with these stations, which are University of Tennessee stations, we have, in addition to temperature, we have solar radiation, wind speed, and humidity, which is better for calculating crop water use. So we don't have as much data as NOAA, but we do have 16 years across those 7 stations. And this may look a little messy at first, but I think we can explain it. So if we take those each month, that's 16 years of data for that month, blue is rainfall, red is crop water use. If you look at the rainfall, what you see here, out of those 16 years, this is the middle 8 are in this range, the top highest 4 in this range, and the lowest 4 in this range. And the same thing for crop water use for May. So the average falls somewhere in the middle of this. And so one of the first things I think you might notice is that crop water use during this June, July, and August, and almost into September, on average is a little higher than average rainfall. So yeah, there can be a need for irrigation on average, but also you should notice that it can be higher. There could be no need for irrigation. It's higher than crop water use, and it can be way lower, a lot of need for irrigation. So we have that complete variability from a lot to little to none that might be required to grow good crops. I think the other thing you should notice is that precipitation in all cases is a lot more variable than crop water use. Yeah, we should know what our crop water use is compared to rainfall, but the thing that's really going to change our decisions is this rainfall pattern compared to our crop water use patterns. Also, if you look outside the growth season, we see how much excess rainfall we have above crop water use. That means the only way we have to get water out of our system is through the soil and our streams and through groundwater movement. Therefore, we really do come into most of the growing season through May into the beginning of June with excess water. And then we can get excess water even from rainfall after that. So we don't only have irrigation problems, we have drainage problems in addition. So going wet can make that even, to the wet side of trends can make that even worse. Again, that data, this is pretty common, but at the same 16 years, if I look at the growing season months of May through September, that's 16 years times 5 months, that's 80 pieces of data. If I look at break that into quarters, 20 months at a time, and I say, all right, here's the high 20 months above this line, here's the low 20 months below this line, and the middle 40 are in here with an average around this middle line. And I think, again, if we break that data just down the middle here at 2012, this 8 years versus that 8 years, it's very striking on the low side. Only 5 of those 20 years are below average in the last 8 years, while as 15 are below average in the previous 8 years. Therefore, and not only that, it's multiple months side by side. So we have low quarter months side by side, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, but separated from each other, 3 here, and even in our driest month in recent year in recent memory, we have 4 of the 5 months in the low quarter. So again, I think that's just really illustrates where we've been and where we are right now. So what does that mean for us? Well, what about irrigated acres? I'll go to this FSA data and just say, well, when we were in the dry cycle and high commodity prices, it looks like we almost more than doubled our irrigated acreage during that period. But since we've hit lower commodity prices in a wet period, it's pretty stagnant. Our federal government data from NASS only comes in 5-year bits, and it does kind of show the same thing, more than doubling of our irrigated acres, but we haven't had time yet to see if it plateaus. We will pretty soon because the next survey is this year. So yeah, less irrigation because of our weather trends. What if you saw something like this in a scenario where you have a drainage ditch here, bottom ground here, hill ground here? What if you saw yields like this? All the nice high yields inside and outside the pivot up on the hill ground, and low yields and no yields along in your wet ground. It's going to cause you to start thinking about drainage. And I think every field in Tennessee has to consider surface drainage. We need to keep water from ponding. We need a way to get it off into this ditch. But also, I think it makes you kind of consider subsurface drainage. If we can get that water table down and create a better environment for the crop to grow, will we be much better off? And so that is happening in Tennessee. We see drainage going in, and therefore we're starting to monitor it. And this is a field we've been monitoring for a couple of years, but it does show, if we put water table monitoring, 60 inches is the ground surface, the sensor's at 0 inches. It shows that coming out of winter into the spring, we're bouncing between the water table being on the surface and just 20 inches down. Then even towards the middle of April, we have a flood event. It's 35 inches above the ground, almost knocks out my data logger. And then after that, we have drier periods, and the drains help dry this out enough that he can plant here towards the middle of May. Again, even after planting, water table goes back up from rainfall events, but now it's dropping back down again. I'm going to give you a prediction by the time we get to Milan field day that this will actually drop down to 5 feet or below, that this crop is going to come to full cover, use a lot of water, plus drainage, draw that water table way down. We'll see if that happens. So how we're monitoring, we're using the same stations we're using in irrigation management, data logger, cell phone, connectivity, rain gauge, soil sensors at 3 depths, but we're adding we're adding a way to measure water table depth to the ground surface. So is it just drainage? Is just irrigation not relevant this time in this wet period? I think not. Here's a farmer yield map that shows irrigated ground fairly out producing dry ground, and again, he's so happy about this. When I go get the sensors and I ask him about getting in the field, he says, "There's nothing to worry about, but just don't get knocked out by those fat soybean pods." So he's really happy about the yield even before he harvests. And sure enough, he's got a 20 bushel yield increase on his irrigated versus his non-irrigated ground during a wet year. And all he had to do was hit the irrigation at the right time, about almost 3 inches in R5. And he's got quite a nice yield boost from just paying attention and hitting it when it really needs it. just a reminder that even though our trend has been wet, even during this wet trend, 2016, this shows, yeah, we in most of Tennessee, by the end of September, we're above average in rainfall and drought conditions. We weren't, or average, but there were some places in Tennessee that were at the worst level, exceptional drought around Chattanooga. So it doesn't mean everybody's going to be wet at the same time. Also, even in a smaller time frame, here, this is 1 week in August, mid-August. This is just rainfall in West Tennessee, and that's in red. You can see that rainfall in this week, because of thunderstorms, varied from a ½ inch all the way up to 5 inches. That's a 5 or 10-fold difference. So we got some people with a ½ inch, that's not enough to meet crop water use, who may need to irrigate, so that's the blue. But we have some people dealing with way too much water, more than they know what to do with. So I think really in reality, we have to pay more attention to do a good job during wet periods and when it's dry, when we know what to do. So that's really all I have for you. I hope to see you, and you can ask some questions at the field day, but if not, here's some contact information for me. Thanks. Have a great day.